In 2003, when I was working at a high-tech firm that shall not be named, as a manager, there were two things that happened to me in very quick succession that changed my perspective on what I should spend my life doing in a really substantial way. In January of 2003, my son Henry was born, and I did what I think all new parents do. I said, how do I give this child the kind of life I want him to have? What school district should we live in? Should we eat only organic fruits and vegetables? All of the questions I think many of you have asked. And in March of 2003, when I was still home on parental leave with him, my brother Jason marched from Kuwait into Iraq as part of the initial invading force. I have vivid memories of holding my son while sending care packages to my brother. The national media likes to say that Iraq is off the table and voters don't care about it anymore. But the voters in my district don't seem to have gotten the memo. Every time I go to talk to a group of voters, the first question I am asked is, how are you going to end the war in Iraq? Voters get it. They understand that we have to end this war if we're going to address any of the other problems that we have. So they would ask me this question, and I had a bit of a problem as a candidate for Congress, which is that I didn't have a good answer to the question of how we were going to end the war in Iraq. I could say, I'm going to end the war in Iraq. I am completely committed to that. But I didn't have a good answer for how. And I kept thinking that an answer to that question would come out of Washington, D.C. But it didn't happen. It's been 5 years, and we haven't gotten an answer to that question. So about 6 months ago, I met a retired Major General by the name of Paul Eaton, who was Petraeus' predecessor in Iraq. He commanded the Iraqi security forces and military from 2003 to 2004. This isn't somebody who would normally be on the advisory committee of my campaign. Here's a guy who voted Republican for most of his life and who voted for George Bush in 2000 and in 2004. But at this point, he is as committed as I am to doing the responsible thing for this country and ending the war. And ending the war is a much broader problem than just the military one. There are more things that need to be done than merely removing our troops and weapons from Iraq. We have to do the diplomatic work that's going to stabilize the region. We have to take responsibility for the humanitarian work that will need to be done with the refugees, both inside and outside of Iraq. And we have to repair the institutions in this country that have failed us and gotten us into this situation to begin with. We've been waiting for 5 years for a top-down solution. No top-down solution is coming. So it's time for us to do a bottoms-up solution, which is why I decided to come to all of you. 5 years ago, frankly, it would have been impossible for us to do what we collectively are going to try to do in the next several months because we didn't have a way to talk to each other very well. 5 years ago, we couldn't have streamed something like this live on the web to reach the thousands of people who are watching it, who aren't in this room but who are participating in the conversation. But in that 5 years, the failure of so many of our institutions has led to individual Americans stepping up to fill the void. You all have done an incredible job. So we have an opportunity now to change the conversation around national security. It has been framed as though the question is the surge working? I'm here to tell you right now that that's a military tactical question that's essentially irrelevant. The question we should be asking is, where do we go from here to do the best that we possibly can for the American people? How do we bring our troops home and the expense of hundreds of billions of dollars. My congressional district alone, and the congressional districts that every one of these candidates is running for, has spent more than $1 billion per congressional district and approaching $2 billion per congressional district just in appropriations. That doesn't even count the 5 times that amount in ultimate economic impact that we're predicting. $3 trillion. There's a bridge in my district that's about to fall into Lake Washington because we can't afford to repair it. You want to know why we can't afford to repair it? Because my district is sending all of its money to Iraq. So, when 6 months ago I met with General Eaton, I asked him if he would help me lay out the answer to the question, how do we end the war in Iraq? And he agreed to do it. And I talked to General Eaton, I talked to General John Johns, I talked to a bunch of people who are specialists in national security, to retired Naval Captain Larry Sequist, who had been in defense policy planning, to a large number of people. I read everything I could get my hands on. I talked to everybody I could, and I talked to other congressional candidates all over the country and said, if we work together, we can change the discussion, and we can take the opposition to the war that all of us share and the American people share and channel it into a real change in the direction of our country this November. So, hopefully as many of you as would like have gotten a copy of this document, which I'm happy to say we printed in-house and bound last night for any of you who are members of labor unions. It lays out exactly what we're going to have to do. It presents a series of actions that Congress can take to remove all of our troops from Iraq and deal with the diplomatic, economic, and structural problems that we're going to have to deal with. It moves us away from the use of military tools to solve this problem. And General Petraeus himself has said there is no military solution, and starts to use some of the other tools at our disposal that might actually solve the problems that we have. It takes a look at the decision-making processes that we have, the checks and balances that we have lost between the executive branch and the legislative branch, between the executive branch and the judicial branch, and between the executive branch and the American people, and works to restore them. I believe, and I'm confident I can speak for my fellow candidates up here, that we have to restore the Constitution to fix this problem. So there are specific pieces of legislation that we called out in the plan that will address a lot of the issues that need to be addressed. There are members of our Congress, like Congresswoman Schakowsky, who have introduced bills into the Congress that will start to address these problems. And all of us can make a difference on those pieces of legislation. If we take the steps outlined in this plan, we're going to be able to make progress on all of the other problems that we face domestically. When the press says that Iraq is off the table, that isn't what my voters think. And it's not just the voters who run across grocery stores to ask me how we're going to end the war. Because even the voters who tell me that the economy is their #1 concern, when I ask them, what's the most important thing you think we can do to fix the economy? The answer is end the war in Iraq. It is going to take public pressure to end this war, and I am asking all of you to engage in that, but it's also going to require political will. It's going to require members of Congress who are going to have real courage about the issues that we're talking about. And I can say confidently that every candidate who's participating in this process and every candidate who's up here has demonstrated the kind of political courage we're going to need to have real change.
Darcy Burner, ladies and gentlemen.